When I moved into my new apartment, it seemed perfect, quiet, cheap, and just the right size. But there was one rule the landlord whispered that I thought was a joke. Never move after midnight without checking your surroundings. I laughed it off, until the first night. When I first saw the apartment, it felt like a stroke of luck. The rent was surprisingly low, the neighborhood quiet, and the listing photos made the place look warm and inviting, as if it had been waiting just for me. After weeks of searching through spaces that were either too expensive, too far from work, or just plain depressing, this one felt like a miracle. The wooden floors creaked pleasantly underfoot, the windows let in just enough light to feel cozy without being overwhelming, and the kitchen and bathroom, though old, had a charm that made me imagine myself settling in for years. It was easy to forget about the small warning the landlord had casually mentioned when he handed me the keys. At the time, I laughed it off, assuming it was just a quirky habit, an odd superstition someone had attached to the apartment. Everything about the space invited comfort. I imagined myself hosting friends, cooking dinners, even reading late into the night with the gentle hum of the radiator in the background. There was an easy feeling of safety that came with moving into a place that finally felt like home. It was the kind of apartment where every detail seemed purposeful, where every corner invited you to stay a little longer. Little did I know, that very sense of comfort and normalcy would become a trap, setting the stage for experiences that would make me question everything I thought I knew about the apartment, and what, or who, might truly be watching. At first, the apartment seemed perfectly ordinary, almost reassuring. But within the first few nights, small things began to creep in, subtle enough that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. The first time it happened, I noticed a faint creak in the hallway outside my bedroom door, soft enough that it could have been the floorboards settling. The second night, a cold draft slipped under the crack of the door, though every window was tightly shut and the heater was running full blast. I tried to rationalize it all. Old buildings shift, pipes groan, shadows move when the light flickers. But then came the little details that didn't make sense. Objects seemed slightly out of place, though I had not touched them. The lights sometimes flickered in a rhythm that didn't match the old wiring. And most unsettling of all, there were moments when the silence felt almost too perfect, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath, waiting. That creeping awareness slowly built a tension I couldn't ignore. I found myself pausing mid-step, listening for sounds that weren't there, double-checking doors and windows, and feeling a subtle pressure in the air, something heavy that wasn't just the night settling around me. It was the first real taste of the apartment's awareness, the hint that perhaps it was more than just walls and floors, more than just a space to live in. Something in the apartment was observing me, testing the boundaries of my comfort, and it didn't take long before I realized that these small, strange signs were only the beginning. The landlord's warning had seemed almost laughable at first. When I met him to collect the keys, he was polite and efficient, moving through the paperwork as if he had done it 1,000 times. But just as I was about to leave, he paused, handed me the keys, and in a low, serious tone said, "One thing, never move after midnight without checking your surroundings." I laughed it off, imagining it was some eccentric habit or superstition of an old man who had lived in the building far too long. I asked if it was a joke, a tradition, anything to give context, but he didn't smile. He simply nodded, repeating his words in a manner that suggested they carried weight far beyond what I understood. That casual warning stuck with me, even as I unpacked and settled in. Initially, I ignored it, convinced it was nothing more than a quirky detail. But the more nights passed, the more I realized that the landlord's words were not a trivial suggestion. They were a boundary, one that had to be respected. Every strange noise, every subtle shift in the apartment seemed to confirm that the warning wasn't about habit or old superstition. It was about survival. There was a reason he emphasized it so carefully, a reason that wasn't meant to scare me but to protect me. And slowly, I began to understand that the apartment had rules of its own, rules that, if broken, could reveal something far more terrifying than I had ever imagined. The first real encounter happened just past midnight, and it changed everything I thought I knew about the apartment. I had been lying in bed, trying to ignore the faint hum of the radiator and the creaks of the old floorboards, when I heard it, a slow, deliberate sound moving through the hallway outside my door. At first, I told myself it was another tenant, or just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the footsteps didn't pass my door. They stopped right in front of it, deliberate and unnervingly precise. Then came the faint sound of breathing, steady and deep, as if someone, or something, was listening intently, waiting for me to make a move. My first instinct was to call out, to ask if anyone was there, but the landlord's warning echoed in my mind. I couldn't look. I couldn't move. The tension was suffocating, the silence stretching out longer than it should, each second a reminder that the apartment wasn't just a place to live. It was aware of me, and it knew when I was awake. Over the following nights, these encounters grew more frequent and unsettling. Footsteps traced patterns through the hallway, lights flickered when I moved, and shadows shifted unnaturally when I tried to glance away. I began to feel a presence behind every creak, every whisper of air. By then, the apartment had stopped being a home. It had become an entity, watching my every movement, testing my boundaries, waiting for me to make a mistake I might never recover from. The constant presence in the apartment began to take its toll. Nights became a battle between exhaustion and fear, each creak and whisper magnified in the darkness. I found myself sleeping with every light on, yet even the glow of lamps couldn't chase away the feeling that I was being observed. My thoughts became consumed by the apartment's movements, the subtle shift of shadows, the way the hallway seemed to stretch impossibly long when I dared to peek, the faint sound of breathing that never seemed to leave. Simple tasks, like moving from one room to another after midnight, became exercises in anxiety. Every step had to be calculated, every glance measured, because I knew, somehow, the apartment was aware. The paranoia seeped into my waking hours as well. I double-checked doors, peered into hallways I should have ignored, and noticed things I had never paid attention to before, patterns in flickering lights, scratches in the floorboards, and corners that seemed darker than they should be. Sleep deprivation amplified the fear, making me question whether what I saw was real or just my mind unraveling under pressure. Friends who visited remarked on my jitteriness, my reluctance to move freely after dark, but they couldn't understand. The apartment wasn't just haunted, it was sentient. It responded to me. It watched. And as my nerves frayed, I realized that the horror wasn't only in what I could see, but in what I couldn't. The unseen eyes, the patient awareness, the knowledge that every move I made, every sound I produced, was catalogued by something I couldn't comprehend, something that had claimed this apartment as its own. By the time I fully understood what was happening, it was too late to feel safe in the apartment ever again. I had learned the lesson the hard way. This wasn't just a building, and I wasn't merely living in a space. The apartment was alive in a way I couldn't explain, aware of my every movement, listening when I thought I was alone, and waiting for me to make a mistake. The lesson I carry with me now is simple, yet chilling. Respect the boundaries of a place that doesn't belong entirely to you. The landlord's warning, which once seemed like an eccentric joke, was carved from experience, fear, and survival. It was meant to protect me, to prevent me from confronting the apartment in ways that could have been catastrophic. Now, every night, I avoid moving around after midnight, every sound and shadow amplified by the memory of what I saw and heard. Even when I close my eyes, I can feel the presence lingering, patient, always aware, reminding me that curiosity has consequences, and that some spaces hold secrets far older and far more intelligent than we are. I tell this story not just to share my experience, but to warn anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. A rule may seem trivial or absurd, but sometimes, it is the thin line between safety and terror. Respect what you cannot see, heed the warnings given, and never underestimate the power of a place that watches, and waits, for every move you make. So if you ever find yourself moving into a new place, and the landlord gives you a rule that sounds absurd, don't dismiss it. Don't laugh it off. Some rules aren't written in ink, they're carved from fear, whispered through sleepless nights, and reinforced by what lurks just out of sight. I learned the hard way that curiosity can be dangerous, and even when the apartment is quiet, it's still watching. Every shadow, every creak, Every faint whisper is a reminder that some places are alive in ways we can't understand, and breaking their rules comes at a cost. So listen, respect the boundaries, and trust your instincts. Because sometimes the walls aren't just walls, they're eyes, and they never forget what they see.